Well, we've driven into the bush, I've parked the troopy, now we're going on a kilometre walk through the bush to find a creek where we're going to set up camp for the night. Well, this is the creek I was looking for. There's a bit of water in it, which is great because this is a nice area to collect water from for our cooking needs and our drinking needs. And we might even have a fish and see what we can catch in there as well. I've recce'd a place where we can set up camp, a nice flat area that's safe from deadfall and all the usual safe things we need to look for. So let's go and have a look at that. This is the area I've chosen to set up camp for the night. The creek's literally only about 15 metres through there. We've got a nice flat area. I've got a couple of trees that we can use to set up a hammock and tarp. It's quite moist and there are quite a lot of leeches around, so I'm going to prefer to be off the ground in this environment because it's like semi-rainforest here, so definitely want to be above the ground. So I'm going to set up a hammock and tarp between these two trees. I'm going to tidy it up. We've done the usual safety checks of looking for deadfall, for safe trees, all that sort of thing, which is standard whenever you set up any sort of camp, being man-made or natural. So let's hook into it. I've cleared the area with my machete, gotten rid of a lot of the lantana, which is a noxious weed from South America. However, it's great for friction fire lighting and shelter building. I've decided we're going to have our fire over this side for the simple reason that it's between the shelter and the creek, which is about 10-15 metres that way, and therefore we're not going to be coming under guy lines and tripping over guy lines through the night as we try to get water from the creek coming back to the fire, etc. So I'm now going to get my hammock and tarp out and we're going to set it up between these two trees here. Well, the pack I'm using for this trip is the Snugpak Rocket Pack, which I often use. It's a very good pack. In the top of the pack, as always, I keep my tarp or my hoochie. That way I can put up a shelter if it's raining, and that's the first thing that goes up to keep me dry and all my equipment dry. So that's number one. In the top of my pack I also keep some other very useful things such as gloves and a head torch and a first aid kit so I can get to them quickly if need be. In the main compartment I have my hammock, and today it's a Snugpak hammock with a built-in mosquito net. It's a good hammock, however it's a bit busy in setting up. It's actually quite involved to set this thing up. I prefer more simple hammocks. As I said, I'm not too much a fan of hammocks, but when you've got to get off the ground such as we are here, that helps. And the built-in mosquito net's going to come in handy because the mosquitoes are pretty crook, let me tell you. So let's get these set up. I'm going to do up my pack. Very important that as you get things out of your pack, you always put things back and get one thing out at a time or two things, and then we do it up. We don't want exploding packs. We don't want to lose anything. We need to know where everything is at all the time. That's what we do in the military. You need to know where everything is in your pack. So if you have to move in a hurry, you can just pick it up and it's ready to go. You've only got one thing out that you need to put away. It just keeps things nice and organised. Well, there's our finished tarp and hammock. Doesn't take long to set up, but as I said, this particular Snugpak hammock and mosquito net, it is a bit busy and convoluted to set up, but you need a couple of spacers, bits of wood. Now, you would have seen those, how we use spacers when we set up the Australian Army mosquito net with the hoochie, and we explained how to do that on another episode. And that's the same principle here. This particular hammock, I find it's too deep. I tend to really fall down in this, and it's got big high sides. I like to look out and see what's going on around me. So Hennessy hammocks are great, I find, as well. However, the shelters are too low. I like to be able to see around me. So if I am using a hammock, this is good, except the problem is the sides are too high. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to get our fire going. I've cleared an area, get some firewood, get our fire going, collect some water and put that onto the boil so we can have a cup of tea and get stuck into dinner. What I'm doing is I'm just digging out a shell scrape for a fire, because I like to collect the coals. It keeps them a little bit longer when you've got a little bit of a shell scrape. We're ready to light our fire, but I'm going to get some water first so I can put some water on the boil. So in the side pocket I always keep, I've got a brew kit, and I keep all my water stuff in one side. So little kitchen sinks, just a little thing. Remember, this is camping style. We're not, this is doing some equipment based stuff. Of course, if you don't have any of this stuff, you have to make it or you could go without. So once again, putting things back in, all I need at the moment is my water bottle and my millbank bag, because we've got a bit of turbidity in the water here, so we're going to have to get rid of that turbidity, and we're going to coarse filter it through our millbank bag, and then we're going to boil that. Take my bottle out, and I'm just going to fill my stainless steel cooking pot with that, and fill up our millbank bag, and we're going to drain it into our cooking pot. Before we fill our millbank bag, we need to saturate it first. Otherwise, it doesn't work as efficiently as it should. You really need to saturate it with loads of water. Really scrunch it up and saturate it completely. Now, I'm in New South Wales. If I was in Northern Australia, there's no way on earth you'd find me at a billabong like this, because this would be full of crocodiles. And it only takes one. So it's a bit of an eerie feeling, actually, because I'm so used to being up there where you just don't do things like this. But it's yeah, it feels very, very strange. So I'm constantly yeah, just have to remind myself that I'm not in Northern Australia. Once the bag is saturated, I can then fill it up. See how that's running? It's a little fast. What we're doing here, we're looking to get rid of all the turbidity. And we need to do that because in order to purify your water, whether it's through man-made, through chemical, through chlorine dioxide, iodine or chlorine, we need to make sure the water's clear for those tablets to work. We also need to make sure that it's clear so that when we boil it, because we don't want any solids in there, because bacteria attaches itself to the solids, so we want to get rid of as much as we can. We're going to be boiling this water, and after we coarse filter this and we boil it, that'll be completely right to drink. Okay, so I'm going to put a bit more water in this. Generally we want to fill it up to past the top. Once it drops down below that level, we can then stick our pot under it to start collecting that water. This water I know is not chemically infected because boiling doesn't get rid of chemical pollutants. You need to make sure that you get some local knowledge about whether there's any pesticides or anything running into the water, but we're in the middle of a rainforest, so it's very unlikely. These millbank bags are really good. They take out a lot of that sediment and the particulate matter, and you need to do this first. All of the water systems you need to coarse filter first to get rid of that particulate matter. And even if the water was 100% clear, there's no waterborne pathogens in the water, you need to make sure you get rid of the turbidity first, because even if there's no waterborne pathogens, you will get an upset stomach from any turbidity that's left in that water. So we need to get rid of that first, and then we're going to put it in this metal cooking pot, and then we're going to boil that water. We only need to boil it for 1 or 2 minutes at the rolling boil, and that will get rid of everything at sea level. The higher you go in elevation, you need to boil the water for longer, because water boils at a lower temperature the higher you go up. So this is it's not too far off filling now, and we're going to take that, get our fire going, and boil some water. Then we can have a good cup of tea and prepare for dinner. Incidentally, these millbank bags, the army issue these, but they're actually phasing these out now, which is a sad thing, and no one uses them anyway. But they're being made by a guy in England called Rupert Brown. You can check out Paul Kirtley's website, his courses at Frontier Bushcraft, as well as his podcasts, which are excellent. And he interviews Rupert Brown that makes these, and it's a very interesting story to how they came about making these, and they really, really are wonderful. An excellent piece of bushcraft kit that everyone should have as part of their kit to get rid of a lot of the turbidity and particulate matter. I've just collected myself as straight a stick as I can find, and I've just notched the end of it, cut in with my saw, and then cut back, because we're going to make a very, very simple pot hanger, and all you need is a straight stick like that and a thicker log, and that's going to take the weight of that. So we're going to stick this into the ground about here, drive it in, and I want that log right up there, nice and strong. And our pot's just going to hang from that over the fire. The Klean Canteen pots are excellent. They really are. They come in a variety of sizes, and this one I've actually used all around the world. This has been on fires all around the world, and it's one, and it's I've had this for about 7 years, this particular one, and it's still going strong. I'm just going to clip this on with some wire. A setup that I actually got from the Pathfinder School. Great piece of kit, but it's just a rig from when they're fishing. It's adapted from that idea. So I'm just going to very gingerly pick that water bottle up. Sometimes it does want to slip off. Check that that's going to be over the fire. There, it's going to be great. So what I'm going to do now I'm going to light my paper bark that I collected earlier. With my ferro rod, which is always kept on a lanyard in my pocket. Once you light, make sure you put everything away, very important. Now I had my fire lay prepared as always with a platform and all our fuel from kindling size up to larger, all prepared out. Preparation always done ahead of time before you do anything else. I did a double platform because the ground's a bit moist. As always, when the flames come through the top, that's when you add your next layer. And that shouldn't take too long to boil. I can now get the rest of the camp ready while that's boiling away. Well, that's come to the rolling boil very quickly, only took about 5 minutes. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to put a glove on because it's quite hot. Now, to be very careful, sometimes these metal rods like to slip off. So very carefully I take that off, and I'll put that down there to cool a bit. I think we might make a cup of tea and we'll start thinking about dinner. The set that I have around my Klean canteen is a Snowpeak mini cook set. Another really good piece of kit, and that fits all together like that. It's made of titanium, very strong, very light, and has a little top like that. Really good piece of kit, nice and light, and it's nice to hike with, and I take this everywhere. So I'm going to make my cup of tea in that, and usually you can boil, I boil in this all the time. Really very versatile piece of kit. Now I'm using gloves at the moment, but if I didn't have using the gloves, I could just use a piece of paper bark to improvise, to use as an improvised glove, and I frequently do that. Just giving that a swish around to get any rid of any dirt, any nasties that might have got in there. And what I've got here is my brew kit. And in my brew kit, I've got tea bags. I like a spot of tea. I've got some powdered milk. I don't usually drink milk, but it's the only thing I have it in is tea. And I don't usually have sugar, but I like a spot of honey in my tea, so we're going to have some honey as well. Tell you what, the mozzies are crook. Really, really bad. I've run out of Yorkshire tea, so we're actually having a Dilmah extra strong tonight. Now what I like to do with my tea bag is I take it out, tread on it to get rid of all the moisture, then I stick that on the fire. I get my powdered milk, which in this case is in a little plastic tub. Now, a lot of people don't like powdered milk. Must admit, I'm not fond of skim milk. Skim powdered milk tastes awful in tea. In fact, it tastes awful no matter what you have it in. But when you're using powdered milk, you need to stir it vigorously. Don't do it at home or you'll make a mess. But out in the bush, it's okay. And that's the best way. Otherwise, you get little floaty bits of, milk floating around. So you really want to stir it vigorously to get it to all mix. Then I get my honey, a little smear of honey in there, and that's all good to go. Let that sit. I'm just going to put everything away as I use things. I like to put everything away as I go. So we've always got a neat and ordered camp. Well, there we go. Nice bush cup of tea with a fire and using the water that we got from nearby. Cheers. And that tastes really good. What we're going to do now, I'm just going to get my sleeping kit out, get that ready for tonight, and then we'll start getting some dinner on. So the sleeping kit we're going to be using tonight is, we're going to use a Snugpak Jungle Bag. Now, I'm not sponsored by Snugpak or anything like that. I just use a lot of their gear, and I like their gear because they've got some really good stuff. Their Jungle Bag, now it's coming into summer. It's November in New South Wales, so it's reasonably warm. How the nights are a bit cool, but this is rated to 7 degrees Celsius, which is plenty warm enough for our needs. And the other reason I like the Jungle Bag is this, as you'll see, opens up, it's square, and you can open it right up to use as a blanket. Because when I'm sleeping in a hammock, I prefer a blanket because it's a real pain trying to use a sleeping bag and get comfortable in a sleeping bag in a hammock. I find I have to get out, put the sleeping bag on and get out and get in, and every time you move you're always adjusting and it's a real pain. That's why I prefer to sleep on the ground. However, using a blanket system I find a lot better. However, in colder weather that's a bit harder. But before we get that set up, whenever you're sleeping in a hammock or on the ground, we need insulation underneath us. We need insulation underneath us to prevent heat loss through either conduction to the cold ground or heat loss through to convection from a cold wind. So we need some form of air pocket underneath us. Now, there's all sorts of special kits you can buy. Different brands have all these winter sleep systems, and yeah, they work really well. But unless you're vehicle camping and you're driving in with that stuff, it's really, really bulky and it takes up lots and lots of room. So personally, I'm not a fan of a lot of that stuff for that reason alone. What I've got here is just simply a 3/4 inflatable sleeping mat. And all I need to do is partially inflate this, stick it underneath me, and that stops me getting the cold back. That's all you need. But you definitely need some form of insulation. The best sleeping bag in the world will compress in a hammock and you'll have a cold back all night. So you need some form of air pocket. All the things you buy have some sort of cocoon system where there's something underneath trapping a layer of air, and that's why they work so well. This does the same thing. Don't inflate it all the way, you'll find it slides round. So I'm just going to put some air into that. All you need is 3/4. On the ground, that's all I use as well. You don't need any more than that. Back it off a bit. That's all we need. So I'm going to stick that in our hammock. I look for the higher side, which I think is this one, because I don't want the blood to run the head. And that's all I need to keep me warm. Well, to keep my back warm. Then I get my sleeping bag out, which, as we said, is the Snugpak Jungle Bag. Packs up quite small, we find it's really good to fit in a pack. Excellent. This also comes with an inbuilt mosquito net. Reason, but I always find I feel claustrophobic in that because you feel like you can't get out. And if a mosquito net's leaning against your face, the mosquitoes just bite through it anyway. You need actually like an air gap between your skin and the net. So I find that those sort of things don't work too well, no matter what the brand is. So I'm going to open this up now, and I'm going to use this like a blanket tonight. So I really find these quite versatile, the Jungle Bag. And you can take your pick. You can use it as a blanket or as a sleeping bag. It's quite versatile. Excellent. Rated to about 7 degrees. So I'm going to plonk that in there, and I'll stick that over myself. I'll lie half in it and put the rest over the top of me. Always pick up my bags, and there's a pocket inside them, but I usually put all my bags inside the pocket that comes with the Snugpak. I do have like a little liner, sleeping bag liner. This is a Cedar Summit, one of the reactor bags, which actually increases the rating of a sleeping bag up to 8 degrees Celsius. Really good actually. I use that all the time. Just if it's that little bit cold, you just stick that on inside your sleeping bag. Keeps the sleeping bag clean and gives you that extra bit of warmth. I'll just keep that there in case it does get a bit cold and I can stick that on. But that blanket should be fine. As far as a pillow is concerned, all I need to, I'll just roll up some clothes, stick some roll those up at the top of my head, and there's my pillow, and I'm good and set for the night. I've got a roof over my head. If it rains, I've got a comfortable sleeping platform. The tarp we're using is it's an Eagle's Nest Outfitters tarp. Great tarp, this one, and you notice that it's not completely symmetrical. It's actually diamond shaped, and that gives us that extra length over our hammock for rain. And I prefer to use this shaped tarp when I'm using a hammock because it actually keeps me a bit more dry. Hoochies work, however they're cut off here, so if there is rain coming from one angle, I find it can get a little bit wet. However, you just got to lower the height of it, and that prevents that anyway. This is set up quite high. In the military, of course, we wouldn't have something this high, but in a jungle environment, the foliage is so thick, it's not really a problem. But we're off the ground tonight. We're going to be warm. We have a roof over our heads. We have a fire, about to get dinner, and I've got a cup of tea that's getting cold there, so I'm going to get stuck into that. Now's a good time to get your head torch out before it gets dark. Don't wait until it gets dark. And head torches are marvellous things. Of course, if you don't have a head torch, you got a fire, that's all you need. But for vehicle-based or equipment-based camping, of course, it's a vital piece of equipment. This particular head torch I'm using tonight is, and I actually use it all the time, is the Lead Lenser MH8. Excellent piece of kit. And the beauty about this torch is once you turn it on, it has 4 different beams of light, from low to medium to high. I'm not going to shine it at the camera. And then we have a strobe. But what's fantastic about this is that with our light, you can actually, it has a focus beam on it, and it actually is really strong. We might have a look at this tonight, but we can find the other way. That's probably the best bet. I'll turn it off again. So there's our first setting, which is low. Second setting, third setting, and if I adjust the focus, it shoots a long way. Now, I've never seen head torches that last as long as the LED lenses do. They're made in Germany, and this one is USB chargeable. You can actually charge this in the USB, or if you've got a solar charger, it is excellent. So you don't need batteries. However, it has the option to come with batteries as well. It really is a great piece of kit. Now, for military use, when I'm with the Army and NORFORCE, this works well for map reading as well, because if you hold the first pressure down, first trigger pressure, we get a red light, and that's great for map reading, and it's not too bright that it gives away your position, so that's actually quite good. You can also change that to green or blue, so you've got a few different options there. You can actually use it as a standalone light, or you can stick it onto your head harness and then use it that way as well. So it's really quite versatile. There's low powered mode, medium powered, and that's high powered. It's pretty strong, and if I put the focus on, that gives me an extra distance, and that is really magnificent. I'll take it off, and now you can get an idea of how strong that light is. So that's the LED lenser MH8. So that's our red mode. There's green, and we also have blue. Works really well for map reading and for military use, those 3 colours. I'll put some water back on the fire to boil so that we can have some dinner. I've also got our Zebra collapsible cooking pot, which is a great addition to take camping. Very small, comes with a fold up handle. I've been boiling some water in that, so that's now boiled. I've just taken that off the fire, and to that we're going to add our dinner. And our dinner tonight is going to be a dehydrated meal, and it's made by Camper's Pantry. Now, these meals are made in Tasmania. Excellent meal. This is a beef teriyaki made with a lot of healthy ingredients, very healthy ingredients. In fact, I wish the Army ration packs were this healthy, because when you're eating those for a couple of weeks, well, they're all full of processed rubbish and sugar, and believe me, after 2 weeks you don't feel too well. But it's either that or nothing, unless you can catch your own food. Another addition I like as far as dehydrated food, you can get some dehydrated food to add some vegetable content, or of course you can add some wild edibles that you may have found. And I'm just going to add that to our hot water. You need quite a bit of water to have dehydrated food. Now, if you're low on water, you don't want to be having dehydrated food. So, because it requires a lot of water to bring that moisture contact back up to where it should be. I'm going to add some peas to that. Now, this has also got some vegetables in it. It's beef cooked in authentic teriyaki sauce with mixed vegetables. So we're getting a few more peas and greens in here. Now, of course, this isn't any substitute to fresh vegetables, but when you're hiking light, it's important, you know, what you have to carry, whatever is in your pack, so you want things to be as light as possible. Let that thicken up a little bit. Maybe just a touch too much water in that. A couple of minutes. Might just stick that on the fire just for a second to give that a bit of a blast. Get a bit more heat into that. These pots are great. The stainless steel ones just last a long time, and they tend to be bomb proof and they just don't go wrong. So always buy some good stainless steel. I have a lot of students on some of our courses buy the aluminium kidney shaped cups that fit under the army water bottles, and if they get the cheap ones, the handles just melt off. So you're better off spending the money and getting something decent that lasts. Titanium is another option, although it's expensive, but really, really strong. But like anything, you make sure you got liquid in there, otherwise you'll burn through the bottom. Wow, that's smelling really, really good. I think we might just give it a little sample. Really good. Another couple of minutes, I think. Now to that you can add some rice, cook up some rice and have a really nice meal. It's actually quite filling meal, but that's going to be absolutely lovely. Dip it into my cup and I'll have some dinner. That looks really good. I should have cooked a bit of rice with it because this won't be enough for me, but I've got some other stuff I can whip up. But really, you don't really need a lot of food. As I said, we know the rules of survival, you know the rules of 3, you can go without 3 weeks without food, so just having a little less isn't going to matter at all. Beautiful night. Mozzies have died down now. Still quite a few leeches. I've actually got a couple of ticks off me as well. I've got paralysis ticks up there. If I can, I'll grab one next time so we can have a look at those. They're pretty nasty actually. But other than that, it's quite a nice night. I'm looking forward to a nice cup of tea after this, and we'll get some shut-eye. Now, to save water when you're out in the bush and you don't have much of it, instead of wasting water washing up, which a lot of people do, all you need to do is get some of the water you boil, or just some cold water, and tip it in your cooking pot that you've just eaten out of. I'm just going to stick that on the ground. And just swirl it around your cup. Give it a stir. Wash off all your cups, make it clean, get your finger in there if you want, as long as it's clean and washed, which mine is. And what I'm doing, I'm just getting any food. This is normally what we get rid of when we use the dish tubs at home. But instead of just throwing that out and wasting it, if we're short on water, we need that water. So I've just made a soup from that, and I can drink that. Therefore, I've got a nice teriyaki flavoured soup. And I've cleaned my cup at the same time. When you're hiking in light and water's in short supply, that's one tip to save water. That water is better off in your system than on the ground. It tastes like beef teriyaki soup. Well, it's late and I'm going to crawl into my hammock and go to sleep. It's been a very nice night tonight. I've had a couple of cups of tea by the fire, just sit and chilled out. A few wallabies running around, redneck wallabies, and you could hear them shuffling around through the leaf matter. A couple of possums, It's been a really, really nice night. So I'm going to crawl into the hammock, get a good night's sleep, and I'll see you in the morning. Well, the fire's gone out. Still a bit chilly actually. I might have to put a jumper on. Give those a dust off. Check your boots. Now usually I'll put a ridge line, I didn't last night, put a ridge line underneath my tarp, so I hang things from underneath that so I don't have to put anything on the ground. In the army that's what I do. A bit lazy yesterday, so I didn't do that. When you've got to film everything, you sometimes forget to do stuff because the filming takes a lot of time to set up. So check your boots, make sure there's nothing inside them. Let's crawl in there, and then once they're clear, it's safe to stick them on. Fire's gone out, so to get stuck into that and sort that out, then we can we'll get some water from the creek, and of course have a nice morning cup of tea before we have a little bit of breakfast. Then we'll go and have a scout around and see what we've got here. There's a close-up of the hammock, the Snugpak hammock with the mosquito net and my sleeping system last night. As I said, it's just a 3/4 sleeping mat, semi-inflated, with a Snugpak Jungle Bag, opened right up to use as a blanket, not as a sleeping bag, and it works very, very well. Always keep my gear when I take my belt off at night. My gear I'm using is my ferro rod. I've got my Garberg stainless version, a Leatherman multi-tool, so I think it's the super tool, and a Bacho Laplander saw. So I keep those all on my belt, and when I'm not using them I hang them up so that they're on the ground. I can get to them very quickly if I need. So I'll just stick those on. The knife goes on first. Most important tool, Garberg. Really happy with that knife, great piece of kit. I've got the carbon and the stainless. If I'm around water I'll generally use the stainless steel one. Stainless is great for holding its edge and it doesn't rust. A little harder to sharpen though. But yeah, pros for and against stainless, but either or, they're both a good knife. The Garberg is a very good knife. I take my Bacho Laplander. Now the Bacho Laplander saw, great piece of kit. We haven't really talked about that, but I use that all the time. And you might have noticed I have an axe there. It's a Granfer's small forest axe, which I use from time to time. It's not a huge axe culture in Australia, and I recently did a course with Paul Kirtley over in England. A fantastic course, one of the best courses I've ever done actually, along with another one of his courses as well. Tremendous stuff. But in Australia I find a saw and I use a machete more in the northern environment. That's my Leatherman super tool going on. So I've got all of my tools, the most important tools, on my person, so they're with me all the time, and they're the main tools in bushcraft: a knife and a saw really, and your ferro rod. Now of course if you don't have any of those things you can make them in nature. If you don't have a knife you have to flint knap something, if you can find some flint and have the knowledge to do so. You can get away with not having a saw if you've got a knife. Multi-tool, as I said, that's just a luxury item because it has some of those items on there. And the other one is of course a ferro rod. ferrocerium rod, but if you don't have one of those, of course, you're going to have to resort to friction fire lighting, which is fun, and it's having the knowledge to do so. But of course, it takes a lot of work, depending on the resources and the conditions. Of course, the harder, or sort of the greater the need for fire, the harder it usually is. But better to have those tools on your person, because they're the main tools we use. Always on the man. I'm actually going to stick it is a bit chilly, so I'm actually going to stick the coat on. This is a Fjallraven woolen lumber jacket, and wool is great around a fire because it doesn't burn, and you know, let's say it resists sparks, and it keeps you warm, and even if it gets wet and damp, it's still warm. And really, for bushcraft out in the bush, wool is king, because it's just durable, and it keeps its warmth for a lot longer. And as I said, it can get wool can actually get it holds 70% of its inchly value when it's wet. I'll stick the hat on, and I'm actually quite warm. And yeah, I use a lot of Fjallraven stuff. In fact, all the stuff I use, it's all organic. I use everything I've used organically for years. Fjallraven pants, great stuff. In fact, all the bushcraft and survival schools around the world use Fjallraven. It's the Swedish brand. It is that good. G1000 material. It lasts a long time. Excellent for bushcraft. Quick drying, extremely durable, and it's also really light. In fact, I haven't come across any clothes that surpass that. So I use that stuff all the time. Shirts, all sorts of things. I've got many different things, pouches that are made of a G1000 material, really good stuff. But their woolen jackets are great as well, and they're really come in bush colours. G1000 up here where you need it for carrying stuff, really top quality gear. They've actually just got a new, they've just opened up stores in Australia actually. Fantastic stuff. However, Australia can be quite expensive, but yeah, fantastic stuff. Well, I've talked enough, so I think we're going to get stuck into getting this fire going again. Well, our fire went out. I mean, there's not enough heat in there to actually stick some kindling or anything to get that going. So I'm going to get this going. I'm going to try and get this going with my ferro rod, dropping a few sparks onto these dead bits of or the incomplete burnt bits of wood. We've got some ash in there. There we go. Let's have a look here. There's going to be enough to get a fire going from this. That's all you need. I just simply turned that over. There was enough heat on the bottom of that. And there we go, we're away. Sometimes getting a fire going is just as simple as that. You don't need to. I've got some dry stuff at hand, which I've got from the dead standing. And all these unburnt pieces of wood can be used again. Because when I leave, I don't want to have any unburnt pieces of wood left. I want it all so it just consumes itself, so it's just ash, and I can spread that around and put some water on it to get it out completely, and there's no shortage of water. So all we needed to do was just add a bit of oxygen to that. There was enough heat, we had fuel, it was just getting fine enough fuel and getting what was left of the heat strong enough to ignite the others. So I've got a fire, got the billy on so we can make the royal cup of tea, and we'll have some breakfast and then we'll carry on with the morning routine. Incidentally, I rigged up a little pole so I could hang my food and my brew kit and things like that off the ground so nothing could get into it. Very simple, and just use the toggle system with some sticks to do that, and that keeps camp nice and ordered, and I can access that very easily. I've had contaminated in water in this, but I will flush it with boiling water before I drink out of it, just to make sure that that's clear. You don't want to be drinking any water that's had unpurified water in it, so you must make sure you flush it out with boiling water, very important. Now, regardless on how long I'm going out into the bush for, I'm always concerned about hygiene, either individually or in a group situation. And in a group situation, it's even more important because everyone's hygiene affects everyone else. So a couple of things that come with me regardless of where I go. Number one, we've seen this in another episode, my toiletry kit, which consists of a roll of toilet paper in there, a small tube of hand sanitizer, and some matches or a cigarette lighter. And that is so I can burn my tail timber. Now around here there's lots of paperbark, so I can use paperbark as toilet paper. But it's very important that make sure, once again, to harp on it, if you're going to go to the toilet in the bush and you use toilet paper, make sure you burn it if it's safe to do so. Clear an area, dig a hole, preferably an area that's nowhere near a water source and it's not where someone's going to walk at all, and burn your tail timber if it's safe to do so. It's not windy, and if you monitor it correctly, you shouldn't have a problem. Lift it over with a stick so that you are not going to leave any unsightly bits of toilet paper which are dug up and blown away, and they stay there for 2 or 3 years. And Australian national parks are littered to it with that sort of thing because people simply don't know how to do the right thing. If people did do those sorts of things, probably more people would be allowed to go more places, but it's because of the idiots and the idle-minded yobbos that just continually litter and litter without any respect for the environment. I don't see that sort of thing happening in Sweden and Scandinavian countries when I'm over there, because they take care of it and they seem to grow up with a respect for the bush, which unfortunately I don't see a lot here. Of course there are people that do, but generally on the whole, a lot of Australians are pretty ignorant when it comes to littering, and littering to me, in my eyes, is a sign of poor character, and it shows a lot of other things that you should be addressing if you don't have the decency to look after the environment, which is self-respect for yourself and respect for other people. That's one of my pet peeves. So take a toiletry kit. There's another episode on where we use these, and I tell you how to use these properly. And if you're not prepared to do that, you shouldn't be going into the bush. Simple as that. That's the level of respect it deserves, and that's what you should be doing. Don't be a yobbo. The other part of a kit, which when I'm in camp, is it's like a little mini kit when on my hiking kit. In here I've got some toothpaste and a small tube of toothbrush and a small tube of toothpaste. These small tubes are hard to get in Australia. I end up getting them overseas. Once again, there's lots of little things like that that's sometimes hard to get here because they're all a little bit too big to fit in the pouches. If I'm travelling, not necessarily out in the bush, because I don't use it out in the bush, you can have a little mini tin of deodorant, but I have an odourless one that I use sometimes in the bush, a scentless one, but if I'm travelling overseas, I'll have something like that on an aeroplane. Another tin of bottle of hand sanitizer, so I'm always can keep my fingers clean, because if I'm cooking and boiling water, anything to do with the mouth, I want to make sure my hands are clean, because I don't want to spread any sort of bacterial germs, either to myself or other people. I have a little thing of wilderness wash in here, which a couple of drops of that, it's concentrate mixed with some water, lathers up to a nice soap, so we can wash ourselves with that. And I have a little thing of either sun cream or moisturizer, but if we get dry skin. Now when I'm actually washing, I always wash in the out in the bush. I generally do it after breakfast when it's warmer and time permitting, but either a bandana or a shamag, I'll use that as my towel kit. All I do is I boil some water up, mix some soap in with the water and get that in, wet my bandana or cloth, and I give myself an army wash, which is pretty much face, armpit and groins, in that order. So, or face, armpit and groin, singly, in that order, and that takes care of all my personal hygiene. And you can do it in a cup of water this big. Obviously throw away the after, and you can actually keep quite clean doing that for a period of time if you keep on top of it and do it every day. And that's what I do when I'm away with NORFORCE on patrols and things like that. That's how we wash up. And if you haven't got a fire, you can cook it up somewhere. You can do it with cold water. It's much nicer with warm water though, but you must make sure you keep on top of your hygiene, because in a group situation that can become a problem. Very, very important. So we might have a look at ways we do this without actually showing you in another episode, and we'll go through the kit and talk about wilderness hygiene and how to stay clean in the bush. We might look at that in another episode. Well, it's about time for a morning cup of tea and a late breakfast. So For breakfast this morning, I just packed some muesli. It's sugar-free muesli. We all know the dangers of sugar and sugar in processed food, which is almost in every single food you buy these days. I think it's, if you took sugar out of all the foods, you'd have about 20% of the foods left on the supermarket shelves. So I try to get sugar-free where possible. However, it does have some bits of fruit in it. At least it's a natural sugar. So I'm going to put this in my cup. Now I'm only out here for a day, but I would obviously bring some more if I was out here for longer. And to that, I'm going to add some water that we've collected from the creek this morning and boiled. If I didn't have my gloves, I'd use a paperbark glove. Put that up there so I won't lose it. This has got some hard crunchy bits, so I like to sort of soften those up a bit. And to that, from my brew kit, which we had a look at yesterday, that a smidgen of honey, maybe a little bit of powdered milk. If I could get powdered almond milk, I would, because I actually don't really drink a lot of milk. However, I do prefer some milk in a cup of tea. Give it a good mix up. That's really good. You can make your own ration packs. There's so much healthy food you could do. I wish the army would do that. Stuff that would last a lot longer, and it's healthy. Limited processed sugar and all the processed rubbish that's in them. Get rid of a lot of that. You can actually have quite healthy meals. Completely possible. Well, when it comes time to pack up, we just simply do everything in the reverse order. We'll take down our hammock, fold everything up, make sure we tie our guide lines up correctly so they're neat, so when the next time we need it, we can use it. The last thing to come down will be my tarp, and that way that if it does decide to rain, I've still got a place to get under and pack most of my gear up, and that's the last thing to come down. So we'll get stuck into it. Just one word of note: when you're folding up a sleeping bag, or I should say rolling up, you never fold it and stick it in, you stuff it in the stuff sack. Anyone that's actually tried to fold it will see that that doesn't quickly work and it's hard to get it in. You're best to stuff it in, and that way it changes the way it folds every single time, so it doesn't get sort of crease memory, for lack of a better word. And it's sort of, every time you put it in, it changes, and it's the only way you're going to get it in. But this jungle bag packs up really, really small. Well, we've packed up our camp, I've put our fire out, and we've extinguished it correctly by first pouring lots of water on it. Well, firstly, we let it burn down to nothing so that there was nothing left. It had all consumed itself. Then we tipped a lot of water on it until it was cool to the touch. We then scattered the ashes around and then covered it back up so that there was no sign. And the whole point is, when we go into nature, we need to leave no trace. We owe it to the environment to do that. In fact, that's one of the principles of bushcraft, going into the environment and leaving no trace. And when you leave the area, you leave it as you found it. That is such an important thing. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe to the channel and share them and like them. Alternatively, if you'd like to do one of our Bushcraft Survival Australia courses, go to our website www.bushcraftsurvivalaustralia.com.au. My name's Gordon Dedman, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.